Well, let's talk about the Brothers Karamazov. It's by Dostoevsky, the Russian writer. I've read a couple other of his books before. I've read The Gambler and The Idiot and a few of his short stories. And I'm a big fan of Dostoevsky in general. I think he's got a really fun and interesting writing style. He's very observant, and everything that he says goes very in depth. Every character is very on the table, open about their feelings in a way that is very Russian, but I think is also very Dostoevsky. Everyone's very logical about how they think and how they feel. So The Brothers Karamazov was an interesting read. It was a little more sporadic than other books of his that I've read, and so I thought it was interesting. The Brothers Karamazov features the Karamazov family, three brothers, the oldest brother Dmitri, and the two younger brothers, Ivan and Alyosha. The three brothers come from Fyodor Karamazov, and Dmitri, the oldest brother, is actually the son of a different mother than the other two younger brothers, Ivan and Alyosha. And for that reason, they have somewhat different lives. Dmitri's a lot older, and he has kind of a different relationship with his father than the two younger sons, although they all have very nuanced relationships with each other and with their father. Fyodor, their father himself, is a very infamous character in this Russian town where they live. He's kind of like a wealthy man, and he also has kind of a grotesque, hedonistic personality. So, you either love him or you hate him, but Fyodor is the kind of guy that ruffles everyone's feathers and goes out of his way to be obnoxious to everybody. And he cannot be tied down, he cannot be tamed. He is a beast of a man, and they get into that quite a lot. And the three younger generation, the three boys of Fyodor's, kind of grapple with their relationship to him and what it means to be Karamazov, and whether or not they are destined to be the same as their father. The two mothers had passed away, but that Fyodor, getting into his elder years, has not stopped his carousing in any way whatsoever. And so the book basically follows a couple of different plots. The youngest son, Alyosha, is trained to be a monk, very out of character for the Karamazovs. But he is training to be a monk, and he works specifically for this very charismatic priest who's kind of like a celebrity in the town. He does things like foretellings and cleansings, and they love the people of the town love him. They look up to him. They idolize Father Zosima. He's kind of an idol, and Alyosha is kind of following his wake. And the book starts with Zosima's death, and so now Alyosha has to grapple with how he's going to move forward in his life. And so this is his kind of returning to his family after the death of the Father Zosima. So Alyosha is like the pure-hearted youngest son. He is pure of heart, pure of soul. He could never see the bad in anything. And so he's kind of like the angel in this little familia mix. But the main crux of the plot then kind of follows the oldest brother, Dmitri. Dmitri is the older brother. He has seen a lot more of the world than Ivan or Alyosha. And Dmitri's back in town as well, for different reasons. He's arguing with his father about an inheritance. And not only that, they're also fighting over the same woman in town, Grushenka, who is kind of a thought, or she has a bad reputation in the town. She's known to, grab men by the balls and strangle them and mess with them. And she has her own reasons for doing these things, which the book kind of gets into. And not only that, but Dmitri actually is in love with Grushenka, but he's already betrothed to Katerina Ivanovna, who herself is kind of like a very, like, reserved, kind of the opposite of Grushenka, kind of a woman. And so, to make matters more complicated, as it turns out, Ivan, the middle brother, is also in love with Katerina Ivanovna. Katerina Ivanovna has kind of resigned herself to just being a person who will support Dmitri despite his insanity and his depravity and his bad choices and his unfaithfulness to Katerina. She decided that she wants to support him anyway, kind of out of a perverse desire to be a martyr. So she chooses to put up with Dmitri's problems. And Dmitri is problematic. He is completely frivolous with money. Actually, the way he kind of got into Katerina's good graces in the first place was he had some money that he had gotten from his inheritance or something, and he actually just ended up giving it all to Katerina when he found out that her family needed some money because of some government possible fraud allegations for her father. So, I mean, her family's ties and her family's wealth, I guess, or financial situation was kind of saved by Dmitri. And that's kind of how their relationship got started, although that's not why he gave it to her, and she did not accept it for that reason. But eventually Dmitri decides he can't be with Katerina. He decides he has to be with Grushenka. Grushenka, on the other hand, does not want Dmitri. So this begets a whole thing where Dmitri has a conflict with his father, and his father's also kind of vying for Grushenka's affection. So they have altercations. He finds out Grushenka has gone to the neighboring town, and the reason that she went to the neighboring town is actually because she has her own love interest who has come back into her life, and Dmitri is not aware of this or the nature of it. But as it turns out, her kind of unrequited love for this man was the reason for her being a cruel woman to the people around her in the town where the Karamazovs live, and why she tends to try and fuck with people. She fucks with Katerina. She laughs about her cruelty. And it's very strange, but somehow, despite all this, Dmitri and Fyodor are both hopelessly in love with this woman, and they are fighting about it, and Fyodor, being the kind of cruel, grotesque man that he is delighting in the depravity of the situation, whereas Dmitri's going basically insane from it. Anyway, this all leads to Dmitri chasing down Grushenka in the next town, and eventually convincing her to take his hand in marriage, and they're going to get married, and she finally decides that the guy that she was with before, he's not who she thought he was, and Dmitri is the guy for her, and she's going to do away with her old ways. Then the sheriff comes in town, basically, and arrests Dmitri for the murder of his father. So before Dmitri had come to chase down Grushenka, he had actually snuck to his father's house that evening. and he was acting crazy all over the town before this, but then he had snuck to his father's house and had actually spied on his father through the window. And he was also aware that his father had put aside some money that he was going to pay to Grushenka, his father, if she would come to his room. And the servant was aware of this and had actually relayed this information to Ivan, and Fyodor had found out about it as well. So this is their reasoning for why they think that Dmitri murdered his father, because his father was found murdered after he had left for Grushenka. Not only that, when he had left, one of the manservants of Fyodor had actually spotted Dmitri running out of the house. And he called out Dmitri's name, and Dmitri was so startled by him that he actually hit the manservant on the head with a rock, and he thought he might have killed that man. So when the cops came to arrest Dmitri, he thought he was being arrested for the murder of the manservant. But it turns out the manservant survived, but his father was murdered. And so the rest of the book carries on in an elaborate trial of Dmitri, and whether or not he is the one who could be held accountable for his father's murder. And, all in all, there's a lot of complexity in legal ways, in legal nuances, especially for their time. I was really surprised at how sophisticated their legal system was. This is from like the 1800s. But basically, there's two lawyers who are kind of batting out. One of them's fighting for Dmitri, the other one against, and basically, as it turns out, it looks like Dmitri didn't do the murder. However, he gets convicted anyway. During this time as well, his brother Ivan found out from the manservant who had originally given them the information that their father was holding this money for Grushenka, and the money was missing after the murder, that actually he had committed the murder. He was the only other possible person who could have done it, but no one believed that he did it. And he knew that no one would believe that he did it because he had kind of laid it out like this. But then he hung himself the night before Dmitri's trial. So Ivan had found out about it, but Ivan himself is afflicted with some kind of brain neuroses. Ivan is the middle brother, and he's got some kind of brain neuroses. So rather than go and tell the information he found out to the prosecutor, or to the sheriff or anyone, he ends up going to his home alone to battle with this shadow that he has in his mind, this wraith, or this poltergeist, or the devil. He thinks he's the devil, and he's basically conversing with the devil for a while. So Ivan goes on a whole thing where he's talking to the devil, and rather than come to his brother's trial to give the evidence that would exonerate his brother, he doesn't make it because of his brain problems. Overall, I would say there were some other little stories. There was a story about a boy and a dog. And the book goes into a lot more details about all the different affairs that the people are having, and all the different, their ways of reasoning. I think one of the areas where Dostoevsky shines is his characters, and really understanding their motivations, and them getting to understand each other's motivations. Everything is very thoroughly written. I would say at times it feels maybe overwritten. I would say that this book was less poignant, for me anyway, than some of the other books that I've read. At the end, I can't really tell you what I was supposed to take away from it, except that, maybe that sometimes when evidence points in a certain direction, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the correct conclusion to make. So even though all the evidence was pointing towards Dmitri being the murderer, as the lawyer pointed out, all of that evidence, when put under scrutiny, was actually not really very good evidence. None of it was damning. It was all kind of nearly evidence. It was all kind of suggestive rather than definite. And to condemn a person to a life of imprisonment or death based on evidence that is not completely surefire can lead to unfortunate consequences, I guess. At the end of the day, the characters, especially Dmitri and Fyodor, were not that likable, so I didn't feel that bad for him, and he did almost murder someone beforehand. So at the end, when it kind of was all over, I was kind of like, oh, yeah, that, I guess it shouldn't have happened. But I have to say, of the books that I've read of Dostoevsky's, maybe I can see the point he's trying to make, and, but I don't think it's his most concise work. It is, there's a lot going on in it, and a lot that I could say probably didn't need to be said. A lot of times the characters just talk too much about their motivations, and it's like, okay, you kind of get it, but I didn't need to know all that. They go into too much depth. It's almost like every character, whenever they have to explain why they want to do something, they're basically writing a thesis about it, or like a Platonic dialogue about why they choose to open the door instead of going through the back door or something, or they just get into too much depth about their motivations. I feel like I didn't need to know all that, and I didn't need so much thorough investigation into why they're doing things. On the other hand, the actual trial, that goes into just as much depth, and in that case, it was kind of necessary because they are trying to really prove something. So in that case, this over-talkingness was probably a good thing. But overall, I have to say, Brothers Karamazov, of the Dostoevsky books, I wouldn't start with it, and, honestly, I would say that at the end, it was an interesting read, but I didn't take too much from it that I probably couldn't have gotten in a more efficient way somewhere else. But it was a unique book for sure, and it made me think a lot about the different types of characters and, the types of people that we might interact with, and, why they act the ways they do. So it's an interesting character study for sure, and Dostoevsky always is an interesting character study. His characters are vibrant and relatable and also complex, and by the end you really feel like you understand why they do what they do in a lot of different ways. So I give the book a solid book out of 5. Brothers Karamazov.